from September 81 till August 1989.
Terrorists connected with the paramilitary UDA claimed the killing. In the hunt that followed, 2 members of the UDR were arrested for colluding with terrorists.
In our investigation into the circumstances of this killing, we've looked into the background of one of the soldiers charged. We wish to state unequivocally, his guilt or innocence is not the subject of this programme. Our sole purpose is to highlight how the UDR's vetting and screening procedures continued to be flawed, despite all the regiment's previous reassurances.
At a court hearing, Crown Counsel said the soldier had admitted to police he'd named McGinn to the UDA as an IRA suspect and that he'd conducted surveillance on him. But the soldier's lawyer disputed the Crown's account. He said his client had made it clear to the police he'd been an unwilling helper. Like many UDR men, the soldier lived with loyalist paramilitaries in the neighbourhood. The court heard the soldier's windows had been smashed more than once. It's well known that on such estates, paramilitaries sometimes try to pressurise UDR men to collaborate with them. The soldier's lawyer told the court the UDA had threatened if he didn't cooperate, he'd be sorted out. The soldier reported the attacks on his flat to his battalion headquarters here in Belfast. We've also learned the battalion had been told by his mother and an army doctor he was suffering from severe stress. Knowing the soldier was vulnerable, the UDR could have swiftly rehoused him, but this wasn't done. The question is, why didn't the UDR heed these warnings? At the time, there was no special regimental screening unit dedicated to checking the paramilitary links of serving soldiers. Despite the record of collusion by some soldiers with loyalist terrorists going back 20 years, no such special screening unit was established until last autumn. Why has, again, such a fundamental, elementary step taken 20 years to introduce?
Well, that is, if I may say so, a question which is quite difficult for somebody to answer who's only actually arrived in the province within the past 6 months. What we have is the unit which you described. It has a role in terms of looking at people who are recruited or seeking to be recruited into the regiment, and it has a role in looking at people who are nominated from within the command as to who might require further screening. But that's a decision, in my view, of a thoroughly practical and constructive kind, and I'm delighted the unit's in place.
But do you think it should have been a decision taken many years ago in hindsight?
I've never been a man for looking over my shoulder at things I've done myself, and I'm certainly not going to start doing it in the case of the decisions of others.
Sir Jack Herman has worked side by side with the UDR, but tonight he makes a radical proposal. The police, he says, should have the last word on whom the regiment recruits.
So you want the police to have a veto on who is taken into the UDR?
Within the context of which I've now described, leaving professional matters to the soldiers, but in terms of integrity, I believe that should rest more squarely with the Royalist Constabulary, who are better qualified to do in-depth assessments as we do for our own members. I think looking at it maturely and responsibly, it would receive serious consideration and should only be avoided for the most valid of reasons. I believe it would help the UDR and the RUC, who are carrying the brunt of the security pressure here.
Since there have been quite a number of disasters while vetting has been in the hands of the army, might it not be sensible to hand it over to the police?
No, there is a... Forgive me, there is an RUC input into that.
Final veto.
There is an RUC input into that process.
But not a veto.
It is likely that RUC input will in fact be sharpened as a result of the setting up of the special unit.
That's not what Sir Jack's saying. He's saying give the RUC a veto.
Yes, I heard it. I heard it. And the decision as to who enters a regiment of the British Army should actually be taken by the British Army.
But why, when their record to date hasn't been that glorious?
Forgive me, you're commenting on a number of cases, and it's a small number of cases of people who have let down the standards of the regiment. It is in response to the events of last summer that the special screening unit was in fact set up.
In their Anglo-Irish talks, Peter Brook and Jerry Collins have developed a good working relationship. but the UDR is now a fraught issue between them.
Sure at the end of the day we're going to have a good meeting.
Dublin has told Mr. Brooke they don't see how it's possible for soldiers drawn almost exclusively from one section of Northern Ireland's divided community to act as impartial peacekeepers. They would prefer to see the regiment gradually replaced by an expanded RUC.
So you would like to see the UDR phased out?
I certainly must say it like this to you, that they have no role to play as they're constituted at the present time under the way they're operating.
Do you think there can ever be peace in Northern Ireland with the UDR constituted in its present form?
I'm afraid I could not see it happening.
Why not?
Because, as I say, the people do not regard them as a force that they can depend on, as a force that they can have respect for, a force whose credibility is highly questioned, more so now than ever before.
If the UDR is regarded, as it is by very many Catholic people and politicians, and certainly the Dublin government, as a kind of Protestant militia and an impediment to reconciliation, why hang on to it?
You are, if I may say so, branding a force of 6,500 men and women of extreme courage who put in, to take a single statistic, 11 million man-hours spent out of bed every year on behalf of the community. That very brave body of men and women constitute some kind of obstacle to the overall issue of confidence. The role they fulfill is key. Where there is behaviour that falls below the highest standards of the regiment, then it should quite clearly be punished immediately.
In its 20-year history, the UDR has trained nearly 40,000 Protestants in how to use a gun. The UDR's staunch defenders in Northern Ireland remind London and Dublin that without the regiment, Protestants will find other ways of defending themselves.
It would be the signal for the increase in a loyalist paramilitary activity, and indeed perhaps for the setting up of other paramilitary organisations, because a people have the right to defend themselves against terrorism.
Isn't one of the reasons, perhaps even the main reason, that the British government won't give ground to Catholics on the UDR is because 20 years on, something like 40,000 men have been trained, professionally trained, in the use of weapons, and that if you were to disband the UDR, it's inevitable that some of these men would go with their expertise into Protestant terrorist groups.
Well, if I may say so, that's a hypothesis that we're not going to pursue. The UDR is an integral part of the British Army and will continue to be so. So the idea that it is in fact going to be disbanded, for which the Irish government have not themselves asked, is not actually a working part of anybody's scenario.
To Loyalists, the UDR fulfills a crucial historical role, the right of the Protestant people to defend themselves. To Nationalists, its mere existence fuels the IRA it's there to defeat. But unless this regiment of Protestants can earn the trust of Catholics, it will remain forever part of the problem it was intended to solve.